I was asked to speak at Operation Teen Literacy. They were doing an event called Teen Author Boot Camp, and they were doing classes about being a dungeon master. I specifically taught a class all about terrain, how to use terrain, why do we use terrain, and what options are available. So this is a longer video, and it's kind of a class presentation or speech. So this is kind of a video you would put on in the background while you're doing some work. Anyway, so enjoy this video about using terrain. This is everything these are all my opinions about using D&D terrain, and I hope you enjoy it. My name is Andrew Ashby. Oh, thank you. I appreciate the enthusiasm. I'm going to be talking about tactical terrain, how to use terrain, how to get your players caring about your terrain. Yeah. It's all about terrain, so if you don't care about terrain, sorry, this class is going to be really boring, but that's what we're talking about. So here are the three things I'm going to focus on. First off, why do we use terrain? There's a question we need to answer there, and it's actually really important because if we're using terrain incorrectly, it sucks. So why do we use terrain? How do we use terrain? What materials, what options are available to us? And lastly, how do we kill our players with terrain? That's the most important question we're going to answer today. My name is Andrew Ashby. I run a gaming store in Provo. It's one of the best places to play D&D. We're called We Geek Together. Come by after this. I'll give you a card for a free set of dice if you want to stop by my gaming tavern. So the question is, why do we use terrain? The answer is not because Matt Mercer uses it. So I'm going to ask you guys this question. Let's start thinking here. Why do we use terrain? All right.
To be able to visualize what it looks like and just play out combat.
Okay, visualization, very important. Good. What else?
To direct the players.
Direct the players, good. Right here, glasses.
Make combat far more entertaining.
Okay, entertaining, good.
It builds story.
Storytelling, absolutely.
To make the players angry.
Yes.
Can be. I love that.
To keep track of where everything is.
To keep track where everything is. Good, good. These are all the correct answer. Terrain adds a level of tactics and awareness that you cannot get through theater of the mind. Also, I'm the worst speller ever, so that's fine. You can laugh at my spelling. Thank you. Tactics and awareness is the big benefit of using terrain. I'm really, really glad nobody said immersion. I will say terrain doesn't really immerse your players. You can't compete with theater of the mind. Theater, your imagination is by far the most powerful thing. Doesn't matter if I've spent literally hundreds of dollars into building a set piece, your imagination will be better. If you've ever read a book and then watched a movie and you're like, I thought that character looked different or sounded different. Okay, that's the idea. Imagination will always trump for immersion. However, if you want to challenge your players and you want to give them more information, that's why we want to use terrain. Okay, so that's the important question answered. And the reason why I pitched this question is because there's a lot of groups, a lot of D&D groups that don't really care about tactics and awareness. You need to be aware of what your group wants. Is your group more story focused and role play focused and problem solving? Maybe instead of spending an hour drawing maps, you should spend an hour making a political system that your players are going to engage with more. Now, if you yourself, if this sounds fun to you, excellent. Keep on doing it. Be the DM that you want to be. But be aware, your players might not appreciate that, and maybe you got to go find a different group that does appreciate it. Okay, so different groups like different things. If your players are more tactically engaged and they like the awareness, they like their combat mechanics and how their players work and how their spells work, then yes, spend some time with terrain. All right, so now we've talked about why. Let's talk about how. How do we use terrain, specifically the materials? Who knows the secret about wrapping paper? If you wrap your presents, if you flip over that wrapping paper, there's a 1-inch grid on the back of almost wrapping paper. Perfect tool for D&D. You can literally go home right now, raid your mom's closet, pull out the wrapping paper, grab your markers. You have all the tools you need to make maps for an entire campaign, okay? Markers and a grid paper is all you need to make cool looking terrain. The more time you spend on it, you know, shading and drawing, the better you can make that look. But yeah, graph paper, we use that a ton in our tavern. We do tournaments, and the graph paper is really nice because we can just trace over it and make the same map over and over and over again. So yeah, graph paper or wrapping paper, very, very cheap, okay? Now let's step up a little bit. Let's spend a little bit more money, okay? $20 gets you this dry erase sheet, and you see this is well used. I've used this many years. It's got two sides, grass and like parchment. This is dry and wet erase, so I can draw on this with wet erase markers, and I have used this for many years, and it even has a compass in the corner, so I can use north, south, east, or west. So I can draw maps on this, reuse this time and time again. I also have, these are dry erase dungeon tiles, okay? Where you can draw out the maps and you can actually connect them. Here's an important term, fog of war. If you don't know what that is, the idea is whatever your players' characters can see is the only information you'll give them, okay? So if there's an enemy hiding in the hallway, don't put that on the map until your players come out into the hallway and then they ambush them. So fog of war is literally what their characters can see. If you play Baldur's Gate or other tactical games like that, they have fog of war. And you can incorporate that in your games with tiles like this where you put the pieces together. Okay? So let's step up a bit more. So we have drawing, okay? We can draw dry erase, wet erase, graph paper. What about printed? You have printed versions, okay? This is a printed dungeon map, and you can see this one goes on forever. It starts from a fantasy town all the way into a castle, okay? I could do an entire campaign with this one map, and I have a few of these in my store, and I can just roll it out to what part of the map I need. Again, it's gridded. This cost about $25, but it's a vinyl printout, and these are pretty good. You can also just use your own printer at home and print maps. In fact, there's a lot of free maps online for that kind of stuff. Just gonna throw you in my wagon here and deal with you later. So printing is another option, and you can even draw on some if you're using paper and pencils. Dax, you need me?
Just saying hi.
Oh, hi, good to see you.
You're awesome. Okay, bye.
I appreciate that. You have printings. Let's talk about physical stuff, okay? First off, there are some amazing resources on YouTube. I'm talking about Blackmagic Craft. That's a great example to start, where you hand make the terrain. Very cheap, very affordable. He makes dungeon tiles for about $15, and he makes 50 of them for about $15. Just some craft paint and some foam you can pick up at the dollar store, and you can have amazing looking terrain. Okay? If you are artistically minded and you're here at this camp in this room, I would say you are probably artistically inclined, then yes, make your own terrain. Use paints, use crafts, use glue. There's a lot of resources online. I would say Blackmagic Craft is a good jumping in point, and then you can just start looking up Dungeons and Dragons tiles or D&D tiles or a farmhouse, and you'll find tons of videos of people making beautiful looking things with cardboard and foam. Just really cheap, really inexpensive stuff. Then you have stuff like this. Okay, this is magnetized tiles. Okay, so again, you can use fog of war because you can build out a room with these. This is a local company that makes them. And I'm going to pass these around so you guys can fidget with them. You see he's got two sides. He's got like a 4 side and a dungeon tile side. Again, they're 1-inch grid, so they allow people to build on them. But they even come with walls. They come with pillars. They come with decorations, so you can decorate the set pieces. Yes?
How much do the tiles cost?
They have kits. They have very basic kits for like $20, and it gets you just some tiles and some basic terrain. And then they have bigger kits for like wilderness and that kind of stuff. So you can, now the problem is when you're buying stuff, your expenses go up a lot, okay? The gold standard, or not the gold standard, but the pinnacle I would say is like Dwarven Forge. This is stuff that Matt Mercer and Critical Role used, Dwarven Forge. Very, very, very expensive. They have sponsorship deals, so they get that terrain for free. You're going to be saving up for a whole summer to get something like that, but it looks beautiful. Okay? So there's physical tiles you can make. There's physical tiles you can buy. Shop around, be smart, maybe jump on a deal if there's like a Kickstarter or something. These were kickstarted, so these are pretty fun. I'll real quick talk about digital maps. Digital maps. Holy cow, there's so many resources on digital maps. If you want to just use a TV, you just plug in a monitor, you can download a digital map and you can move your players around on a digital map. And there's very simple stuff from like you just download a picture of a map and you use any photo program, like Photoshop or something. Or you can go as complex and get a VTT, which is a virtual tabletop. VTT, there's a lot of virtual tabletops. I know D&D Beyond has their own virtual tabletop that they're developing. There's quite a few if you Google virtual tabletops. There's a lot of tools, and they have stuff like ambient lighting where you can drop torches in the room. Again, fog of war where you can't see enemies. They even have some with animations, spell effects, measuring. So there's a lot of cool tools online digitally that you can play either remotely with players or you can just bring a monitor and show them and just tell players, okay, where are you moving? If you want to get really advanced, at my gaming tavern, we have table TVs with a glass over it so you can put the map on the TV and then your players can actually put miniatures on top of the map. Obviously very expensive. We spent a lot of money on those. I don't think you guys have access to that yet, but that's something that is an option at some game stores if they're cool. So you have virtual maps. Lastly, we're going to talk about 3D printing. I have a fondness and a hatred of 3D printing. Okay, if you are in the D&D space, you might hear about how amazing 3D printing is because you can print miniatures, you can print terrain, you can print monsters. Here's the truth about 3D printing. It's its own entire hobby and its own entire expense, okay? To get a 3D printer working consistently, you gotta be on forums, you gotta be watching YouTube videos, you gotta be fixing the darn thing all the time. And so if you're like, oh, I'm just gonna buy a 3D printer and print out whatever I want, that's not how 3D printing works. It takes a lot of time and maintenance. Yes?
You also need, if you want like to print miniatures, you need like a resin printer, which are a lot more work than filament printers. And if you want to print like big things like that, then you print like the printer.
Fantastic. So you've been doing some research, so you know a bit about 3D printing.
I just bought one.
Okay.
$500.
Yeah, what'd you get, resin or FDM?
I got not resin, FDM.
FDM?
My dad has a resin printer though.
Okay.
And the resin printers are hard for anything larger than a minifigure because you get warping issues.
Yes. So real quick, talk about resin and FDM. I'm just going to give you guys the ideas. You're going to have to do your own research because this is a whole rabbit hole on itself. Resin is great for miniatures and anything about miniature size, barrels, little decorations in your room. However, the second you start getting bigger than a dragon, it gets very expensive and it gets very complicated. This airship would be pretty much impossible in resin with today's technology. Maybe in 5-10 years, maybe. Also, it would be stupid expensive. We're talking about $3,000 to $5,000 if I printed it in resin. FDM doesn't make pretty miniatures. It's not really good for tiny miniatures. However, anything bigger, dungeon tiles, rooms, a dragon, an airship, it will absolutely do just fine. And it'll give you pretty good quality and it's decently affordable. I mean, yes, you're going to spend $300 on a printer, but once you do that, the plastic itself is pretty cheap, about $20 a roll. This airship cost me about $600 worth of material. Okay, so that's a lot, but there's no other way I could get this airship nearly that. This would sell for quite a few thousand. So yeah, just if you want to get into 3D printing, just realize it's a huge ask. It's a big rabbit hole. You got to do a lot of work up front to get it working, and you're going to be doing a lot of maintenance. And if that sounds like maybe not, stick to foam and paper crafts. That will be a lot more rewarding, a lot cheaper, and a lot easier. All right, so those are the different materials we can use for terrain. Any questions about materials before I jump into the cool question how do we kill our players? Because that's what we're really here for, is how do we kill our players with terrain. Questions on materials? Perfect. Okay. All right, cool stuff. Terrain. Okay? Especially how to kill our players. We have some very helpful tools in our terrain to kill our players, or at least to facilitate tactical challenges. Because again, that's the question. Why? Because we want to challenge our players with tactics. All right. First off, you have bottlenecks. Okay. Bottlenecks is like a bridge or a narrow hallway, something that your players are forced to move. See you, Ryan.
See ya.
Bottleneck is great for players or for enemies, depending on who needs to attack what side. You can have archers on the other side of the bridge just pinging away. You can set traps on the bridge. Bottlenecks are a fantastic example. All right? We'll pass that around as a good example of bottlenecks, and I'll write that down here. Again, spelling is not my forte. That is fine. All right, cover. Okay? Tactical use of cover. A lot of people don't realize how important cover is, and this is for players and dungeon masters. If you study old castles, castles were built to be siege-proof. A good example, arrow slits. Does anybody know how medieval castles had arrow slits? Yeah? Tell me about it.
It basically, on the top of the castles, wait, do you mean like the windows or whatever?
Yeah, the windows that archers would be able to shoot out of.
They occasionally have like windows inside buildings,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the main things is on the top of the castle they would have like the
Ramparts.
look. The reason was archers could hide behind the taller pieces and shoot in between the shorters.
Exactly. So, for those of you who don't know, arrow slits, it was a really tiny hole in the wall that an archer could peek through. And the way it was built, it was a funnel out. So the archer could see a pretty big part of the battlefield. However, this was about how big the window was. And so that would allow an archer to line up their shot, shoot. But if you were attacking from the other angle, the only view of your archer you get is about a 2-inch hole. And so the archer defending has half of the battlefield they have access to, and anyone attacking the archer only has that really tiny window to attack. Okay? You can absolutely use cover to destroy your players. Your characters, or your enemies, they have movement, okay? So you have a hobgoblin behind cover, full cover, obscured. The players can't see him. He moves 5 feet. He's 3/4 out of cover. All the players see is his bow and his eye. He shoots, and then he steps fully back into cover. Okay? That only took him 10 feet of movement, and he was able to hit anyone on the battlefield. And that's brutal for your players to try to figure out, because they have to either run up, and they're going to get pelted with arrows, or they have to hold their action and wait for that tiny half second that they have to shoot at the guy, but he's still in 3/4 cover. So they probably have to use magic, like magic missiles and stuff. And now they're expending valuable resources on a simple archer. So cover is fantastic use. Okay? Traps or danger. Okay? Ooh, I need to write this down. So we have bottlenecks, we had cover, traps or danger. Okay? You can absolutely cover your place and traps, spike pits, lava, those kind of things that force players, hey, if you step here, you're going to get hurt. And they can be either hidden traps or visible traps. That's good. Nature is another very dangerous thing. We're talking about running rivers. We also talked about lava, wind, on a cliffside. Very dangerous terrain that we can use. And last but certainly not least, magic. Magic, I love magic because magic can do anything. Nature, cool. Magic can literally do anything. It could be a crystal in the wizard's castle that's going haywire. And every turn, it's going to teleport one random person to a different spot in the room. So suddenly the wizard who is in the back row, being very safe, suddenly is now teleported to the other side of the room where all the enemies are, okay? You can have a magical fire that only hurts the heroes, and the enemies are immune to it because they have fire blood. There's so many things you can do with magic. You can have a black hole that is slowly sucking everything into it, and so your players have to constantly be spending their movement running away from the black hole, and the enemies just sit there with spears waiting for the players to just get sucked into their spears. So there's so many different things you can do with magic. You can use creativity and make, you can just have so much fun. Shifting planes, existences, a lot of stuff to do with magic. So those are the different ways we can kill players. Now, moderation in all things, okay? If I go ham with all of this stuff, I can kill a level 5 party with 6 goblins and 2 hobgoblins. All right? If I use all of these tricks, I can easily TPK a medium to high level party. I will say, here's one complaint about D&D and other TTRPG games. After level 10 in D&D, your players have so many abilities and so many skills that terrain and combat kind of become less tactical because your players can fly. They can move 200 feet in a turn. They can teleport anywhere. They have spells that don't care about line of sight. So that archer who was in really good cover and was being really smart about his movement doesn't matter when I can drop a nuke right behind him, all right? So that's the problem with high-level games, and that's the frustration a lot of us dungeon masters, if we do decide to run a high-level game. How do you run a high-level game that's tactics focused? How do you run a tactic-focused game at high levels? And that's a big challenge a lot of people face. If you look at Critical Role, Matt Mercer, or Brennan Lee Mulligan, they don't engage too much in combat. They might do one combat session, maybe. And they make sure that they are really cool set pieces, okay? Because it's really hard to challenge these high-level players. So that is another food for thought. If you are going to be using tactics and a lot of stuff, maybe trim down your encounters. Maybe get rid of the meaningless encounters and only focus on the really important story beats so you have more time to make them more engaging. So that's, high level kind of sucks, but use this stuff in moderation. The idea I have is every time I run a combat encounter, I want to have 1 to 2 of these items in play, okay? So maybe my players have to cross a river because there's a bunch of archers on the other side shooting them. And maybe with the river, there's also a bridge, but it's a rickety bridge that they or the enemies might cut down. Okay, so that's 2. But I'm not going to then throw traps or extra cover into it, okay? Unless I really hate my players that day. Okay, another example is my enemies are in cover. They're fortified, they're archers ready to go. And before you can even get up to the cover, they have set traps. Spike pits, so the barbarian who wants to run up and just try to smash through the cover, hey, he's going to get stuck in a lot of spike pits, okay? Or I can do magic and bottlenecks, or magic. What if there is a black hole and it's in the center of a room and there's a bottleneck? I've created terrain that has blocked it, so either you have to go through the black hole and find out what happens, or the enemy mages are just going to keep on pelting you with spells. So only do 1 or 2 main focuses on your terrain. Don't really go crazy with that kind of stuff. The other thing you want to think about is how are your enemies going to use this terrain to your advantage, or to their advantage? Because your players are going to try to do the same thing. How do your enemies adapt to the terrain? Again, I can kill a medium level party with 6 goblins and 2 hobgoblins, because they've set traps, and they're in cover, and they're hidden, and they've got nature on their side because they're super stealthy, and the players are bottlenecked on a road. So your enemies are smart. They should be thinking about how they're going to use the terrain, and even set them up in the terrain. Set those archers already in cover. set the enemy mages already on the other side of the room, set their skirmishers, their runners in the front of the room ready to ambush. Then you get into the complexities of enemy types. What does this enemy want to do in combat? All right, if it's an archer, it wants to shoot at enemies and it wants to stay far away. Is it a rusher? All right, they want to get as close to the mage or the attacker, and they just want to attack and disrupt people. All right, this is a caster, and they want to control. They want to use spells to push enemies away and keep them away. Or they're a support healer. So you want to think about how your enemies work with each other. Okay, we're using tactics against your enemies. A fantastic book is Enemies. Shoot, I forgot the name of the book. Whatever. It's about how your enemies should be able to kill players. Your enemies have brains too. They know how to strategize. They know how to talk. They know how to work with each other. All right. So that is how to kill our players with terrain. Why do we want to kill our players with terrain?
Because they're a bunch of bards.
And what material?
Yeah, because they're bards.
Because they're all bards, and they wanted to do a rock band together. All right.
Kill the bards. Kill the bards.
So now that we've gone over this, I'm going to open it up to questions. And then I want to do some design work with you guys. I want to actually build a few encounters that are brutal and fun for your players. But before we get to the design work, let's ask some questions. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.